massive spoilers for the Eden Zero anime and manga, primarily Season 2 of Eden Zero. So with episode 31 of Eden Zero currently out, we finally got the animated debut of Rebecca's true Ether Gear ability, Cat Leaper. And honestly, they adapted that scene very well. Rebecca's reaction, how she cat leaped, I liked the entire scene, and how she just unlocked her Cat Leaper abilities. But I'm fairly certain that there are some anime onlys that don't fully understand what just happened. Did Rebecca just travel all the way back in time to a specific point in time at will by accident? How does this even work? Etc. So I'm going to take this video to briefly explain what Rebecca's Cat Leaper ability is and what it does to help you better understand what it is. There's going to be some light manga spoilers, but I'm not going to spoil any future events, just how Rebecca's ability works and how we can classify it. I plan to make an entire video on Rebecca herself, so look forward to that because I do want to bring back Eden Zero explained videos since the anime is currently airing. And also, I just missed doing those videos, and I postponed them for roughly 2 years at this point, and I am very due to make it. But if this video does well, I'll bring back Eden Zero Explained videos for every 2 weeks, maybe every month, to see how those do while the anime is airing, as it is a 2-course series, so it's going to end sometime in the summer. So, Eden Zero content's going to be strong on the channel for the meantime. But let's just hit that intro and get right into explaining Rebecca's Ether Gear. So, really quick, before Cat Leaper, we have to understand what Rebecca's ability Leaper is originally. Her ability is something that she was actually born with. I'm not going to get too into the nitty-gritty, as that is like full-on manga spoilers. It could spoil more stuff about Rebecca. But the initial Leaper ability just increases her speed and agility, and as we saw at the start of Season 2, it was also able to extend to her ship, allowing her to maneuver past some obstacles and an enemy ship in space, as the Leaper ability was able to extend to her actual ship and help her pilot through the area. So Leaper's base ability, just to increase her speed and agility, and it's based in her legs. It's very useful and helps her get out of a few situations. Now, Cat Leaper is an entirely different story. On the baseline, it is, yes, a time-traveling ability, but its utilization is actually pretty varied and not used to undermine the plot. Let's go over what just happened in the anime in episode 31. Rebecca's Cat Leaper ability fully activated and allowed her to jump back into the past to the point where she woke up after passing out in the Eden's One bath, around the same time when she woke up at the start of the season after seeing that bizarre vision of Shiki in a seemingly post-apocalyptic future. Now, what this was a time leap back in time. However, it didn't just simply reverse time or send Rebecca back in time. What this did was bring Rebecca to an entirely different timeline. By doing this, not only does Rebecca start an entirely brand new timeline, where events can go on similar or go towards the same path, but with Rebecca's future knowledge, she can actually change things for the better, as we'll see later on in the season. However, this is just not just going back in time. This timeline actually holds some sort of consequence because, while it's not outright stated, it is heavily implied that the timelines that Rebecca leaves behind are still ongoing. Meaning the Shiki, Wise, Homer, the Eden Zero crew that we saw and ventured out into the cosmos with from the very beginning of the series ended in failure. They died or they were sold off, and that is a reality. That is a timeline that Rebecca's Cat Leaper ability basically made her go backwards to an entirely different timeline so she can start things over, transferring over her ether, her memories, her soul to an entirely different body. Meaning that the Rebecca that is in World 29, which the number that Rebecca is utilized as is the world number that the Eden Zero story is currently in, which is what we refer to as a different timelines. It gets a bit more complex, but also a bit more simpler as we'll go on. But when she goes back in time to a previous point, the world number goes up. So 29 was the original timeline that we saw up until this point in the Eden Zero universe, and when she went back in time, we entered World 30, which is the world where she actually helps the Eden Zero crew by giving them information about the future so they can change things. Now this also implies that Rebecca has subconsciously used Cat Leaper at least 28 different times throughout her life. So throughout the story, anything that was seemingly her about to die could have potentially been utilizing and subconsciously activating her caliber ability to save her at the last possible moment. The biggest thing that we could have seen was when her Libra ability initially activated in her fight against Nino on Sun Jewel, where her ether gear first activated. It was literally described as time moving backwards. So that could have been World 28, and that brought us to World 29. However, the furthest explanation that we can think of was Happy's accident when Rebecca was a little girl. In that accident, Rebecca seemingly got off with minor injuries while Happy was basically near death with the bottom half of his body ripped off. That is in the manga. The anime actually centered that heavily, but it was a lot more gruesome in the manga. We can assume that accident, Rebecca was actually supposed to get hit by that exact same truck, but Caliber activated, changing her position, and thus she avoided major life-threatening injuries. Now, the whole timeline thing can be a bit confusing. However, I'm going to specifically state this. No, this ability does not actually take away any consequence in Eden Zero. That is something that a lot of people have speculated on. How is this going to be utilized? Will this take away any form of stakes in the story? And as we'll see, most likely in Season 3 and even in the latter half of Season 2, that is simply not the case. Caliper, Rebecca does not have full control over. And here's the thing. There are consequences. And let me just say this. You guys are now ready for Season 3 of Eden Zero, because that will break you. Manga readers know what I'm talking about. But Eden Zero does a good job of not overusing Rebecca's ability. Instead, giving her a small bit of control with the reversal aspect of her Caliper ability, which is actually a very nice and useful way for Rebecca to get out of sticky situations and use her head. Because what reversal is, and we'll get into this in the second core of Eden Zero, this ability allows her to jump backwards 90 seconds into the past. But doing so does not change the world number. Since it is a relatively smaller change, it doesn't full-on diverge the timeline, and she doesn't go back too far. 90 seconds will not instantly change the timeline that they're in. It'll just reverse her mind backwards in that same timeline, and she can change things from there, but it won't overall change the initial timeline that they are in. And the world number will not change. But while this seems like a very useful and very cool ability, and it is, Rebecca does have a limit of 3 uses, and this is constant throughout the series up until a specific point that we know of. Because once she uses all 3 tries, her body will suddenly begin to crack up, and she will begin to get fatigued and be in immense pain. Because the more she uses her Caliber ability, the more it'll take a toll on her body, and it could potentially kill her, or just flat out shatter and destroy her own body. We get an example of this that will happen in Season 3, but I'm not going to spoil what happens or how this ends up looking, but trust me, Rebecca does have a hard cap on this reversal aspect of her Cat Leaper ability. Now, another aspect to this that I should have mentioned with the Time Leap is that we've seen 2 instances Rebecca actually got glimpses of potential futures. One is something that'll happen in Season 3, which I'm not going to show or mention, and another is at the beginning of Season 2, which was her very real feeling vision of a darker future with an alternate Shiki. That is presumed to be real. Her Caliper ability seemingly sending off her spirit, her ether to a potential future timeline, and overriding that Rebecca for a short period of time until she goes right back. So it seemed that she can actually go permanently to the past version of herself by sending her ether, but going to the future is only temporary, a few seconds, a few minutes from what we've seen and what we will see with that next instance. This only happened twice in the series so far, so not too much else we can go off of, but it is a brief instance and it is used to fully foreshadow how strong her ability is, and perhaps she could even potentially go to the future and see what happens next. So in summation, Caliber is a time travel ability, but also is used to increase Rebecca's speed, strength, and agility. Primarily her speed and agility. But by being able to go back in time a specific amount, perhaps a couple of days like we've seen in the anime, or even a few minutes to a certain degree, it could potentially alter the timeline they're in, and Rebecca can go back to a different timeline where certain aspects will be different, even in the past, because remember, up until episode 30 of the anime, that was the crew that we saw, and that story ended when Rebecca jumped back in time, going to an entirely new timeline, and changing the story from there. But what I didn't fully mention is that going to a different timeline does not mean everything is exactly the same. It's similar enough, but there is a specific change and difference whenever she goes back to a different world. In this one, Captain Connor is not on the Eden Zero. They never met Connor on their way to Sunjewel, and he's not there. This will become relevant as the series progresses. It is an important piece of information, but Connor is not there. That is an important thing to note, and so the timeline progresses with him not there. So while seemingly like an insignificant change, it is important because that shows that even if Rebecca travels back in time a significant amount again to potentially try and save the world or her friends, the timeline she goes to could be entirely or slightly different. She has no real control over how this ends up progressing. So there is consequences to her potentially leaving her friends behind in one timeline to be doomed to go back to another version of her friends and try and save them, but things could be entirely different. But those changes aren't super big. That's why they are designated as worlds. Lastly, with Cat Leaper, we need to address something called universes. Now, this is like whole multiversal shtick that could be incredibly complicated in video on its own, but this ties into Cat Leaper to an extent, so I just wanted to mention it here, and this gets explained later on in the series, probably season 4-ish, so minor manga spoilers for how this goes on. But universes are basically specific worlds that have had massive timeline changes. This makes things a lot more simpler to keep track of things. We've had Universe 1, that could be what happened up until Rebecca's first time leap, and the current universe that we're in right now would be Rebecca post time leap to stop Dragon Joe with all of her previous information from the timeline where Shiki and Co. were defeated and killed. That is the bare bones explanation for it, but a very large change in the timeline that Rebecca goes back to, or some significant event, could change it from a world to a whole universe, meaning a lot of things could be different and not just one person not being there or certain things happening in a different order. This will get explained more as the series progresses, but I figured I'd mention it here since it does loosely relate to Rebecca's Cat Leaper abilities. Since she can basically alter time, and the bigger the change, the different universe could actually be formed through that different timeline. But yeah, that was just a brief explanation of Rebecca's Cat Leaper abilities, what it does, the whole timeline spiel, how she can go back in time, go potentially in the future, and how she has a hard limit on her Cat Leaper abilities. I hope this helps. There's more to get into with Rebecca and even Cat Leaper to a specific degree, but I just wanted to make this brief video to help anime fans actually better understand her abilities, because it can be a bit confusing at first viewing until more information is dropped in the future of this season and in season 3, so I just felt like I should mention this right here to help you guys understand a bit better. And again, this could have been done a lot better. I'm going to make a whole video on Rebecca herself in the future. If this video does well, I'll bring back Eden Zero Explained to fully explain not just Rebecca's Ether Gear and who Rebecca is, but also go through the rest of the Eden Zero crew and future characters that we'll see in the story. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video on Rebecca's Cat Leaper abilities being explained to an extent. I hope this helped you guys understand things better. If you want to see me do more Eden Zero content on the channel, please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. It really does help, and it shows, again, your support for this content. And with Eden Zero's anime currently airing with a 2-core, I really want to make more Eden Zero content. I feel like this is a good chance for me to bring it back. And if this video does well, go over 1,000 views, maybe 2,000, I'll bring back Eden Zero Explained and go over each member of the Eden Zero crew and then future important characters that we will end up seeing. And I'll even update the Shiki explained video, as there is some more with Shiki that I do want to get into, because I made that during events in the manga that would be considered season 3. And some stuff has happened where I will need to update. But with all that said and done, hope you enjoyed the video. Look forward to more Eden Zero content. And with all that said and done, I hope you all have an awesome day.